I had just acquired creator-like powers, but the very next day, the hospital diagnosed me with stomach cancer. To stay alive, I transformed the apple orchard on my old family farm into a sandbox world. I accelerated the evolutionary process of life, hoping only to create a civilization capable of curing my cancer. As my square sandbox was continuously explored by the ancients, they were shocked to discover that the world was flat and square, and even contained colossal giants towering thousands of feet high. Whenever a civilization developed in a way that didn't meet my expectations, I would tear everything down and start over. I would give the hero of each civilization a chance to ask me a question. Whenever they asked me how many days it took to create the world, I would think back to the scene of myself driving a tractor, digging up dirt to build the sandbox, and I would answer, it took me exactly 7 days to create this land. Thus, the legend that God created all things in just 7 days spread across the land. Civilizations replaced one another in my sandbox time and time again, but who could have imagined that so many dazzling and glorious civilizations all originated from a single spore? My name is Julian Midstage Stomach Cancer. In this remote, godforsaken farm in upstate New York, I just wanted to spend the rest of my days in peace. But while I was cleaning the barn, a black, baseball-sized beetle suddenly appeared in a pile of weeds. Just as I reached out my hand, with a swoosh, my mind was instantly sucked into a vast, starry history. Good lord, this wasn't a bug at all. It was a Zerg Brood Mother war fortress from a high-dimensional universe. The previous generation's Brood Mother had failed in her assault on a higher dimensional world. Before she died, she left her final words, stating that they had taken the wrong evolutionary path. The larger the body, the closer it is to a dead end. Only the most microscopic bodies possess the potential for a qualitative leap in energy. And now, I had become the new master of the brood nest. The Zerg have only one absurdly overpowered ability, ultra-high-speed cell division. As long as Zerg spores are deployed, they can frantically undergo birth, reproduction, evolution, and death in an extremely short period. My heart, which had almost been extinguished by the torment of cancer, instantly started pounding. I didn't own an entire planet, but I had 20 acres of abandoned apple orchard behind my house. I could completely transform this orchard into a miniature evolutionary sandbox. If I could deduce a brilliant civilization within it, I might just find a cure for my cancer. This was absolutely my last lifeline. Feeling like I had chugged 10 cans of Red Bull, I dug out the dusty old Ford pickup from the garage, drove into town, and spent the last few $1,000s of my savings on various agricultural tools and materials. I hired people to bulldoze the orchard, and with a shovel, I personally dug out miniature mountains and rivers. I spent a premium to expand the irrigation pond in the yard, poured bags of sea salt into it, and forcefully created an artificial ocean. Wielding a high-powered industrial flamethrower, I scorched every inch of the sandbox's soil. I absolutely could not let existing Earth organisms interfere with my species' evolution. Everything was ready. I controlled the Zerg nest's secondary brain and deployed the first batch of single-celled spores into the central ocean. Then, I issued the fate-altering command, cell division acceleration, 10,000 times. According to the Zerg settings, 1 times acceleration equals 1 year. At 10,000 times acceleration, 1 day in the sandbox equaled a long 10,000 years. For the first 4 days, the crystal-clear ocean remained completely still. It wasn't until the 5th day that the water began to turn murky, and plankton finally sprouted in the sea. To carry out the previous brood mother's dying wish, I directly placed a genetic lock on them, restricting their maximum size. From then on, ordinary creatures in the sandbox would be smaller than ants. Even if they evolved into a T-Rex-level prehistoric behemoth, the largest wouldn't exceed the size of a cat. For them, the 20-acre sandbox was as vast as the entire continent of North America. By the afternoon of the 6th day, multicellular organisms began to appear in the seawater, and a colorful array of aquatic plants started proliferating crazily, like someone had hit the fast-forward button. This was equivalent to Earth's Cambrian explosion 500 million years ago. But before I could even celebrate, it got dark. 1 day in the sandbox equaled 10,000 years, which meant that these newly born little lives had to face a long 5,000-year night. The moment the sunlight disappeared, a horrific catastrophe occurred in the seawater. Large swaths of plants withered instantly and sank to the bottom. My evolutionary epic welcomed its first mass extinction. The entire ocean became lifeless, as if turning into a pool of dead water. Just as my palms began to sweat from anxiety, half an hour later, a faint hint of blue surfaced on the ocean. It was the only surviving plant. I called it the blue moon grass. To stay alive, it had actually shifted the source of its photosynthesis to the faint moonlight in the sky. In just a few hours, it reproduced madly and even evolved a carnivorous branch that cannibalized its own kind, establishing its own diverse civilization in the dark. I named this dark epic the Dark Cambrian Era. Having survived the night, the dawn of the 7th day arrived. But the moment the sun rose, the second mass extinction descended. The blue moon grass, accustomed to the weak moonlight, couldn't withstand the scorching sun at all. They were scorched and sank into the sea. It wasn't until the afternoon that a mutant, star-shaped seaweed was reborn in the blazing heat. It closed during the day and opened at night, perfectly adapting to the 5,000-year cycle of sun and moon. I named this epic the Light Cambrian Era. With the flourishing of aquatic plants, the oxygen levels in the seawater soared. When night fell, the first batch of black beetles finally crawled out of the ocean. Animals had officially stepped onto the stage of history. Watching this group of ant-sized animals start crawling onto land, I couldn't suppress the urge to stir things up. If I relied solely on natural evolution, how long would it take to evolve an intelligent civilization? I needed to give them a serious boost. Sporting my thinning, post-chemotherapy hair, I drove my pickup straight to the state wildlife park. I slipped the zookeeper a $500 tip and managed to extract a vial of blood from their strongest silverback gorilla. On the way back, I also conveniently grabbed a nest of termites from under a tree stump. The intelligence of a gorilla combined with the terrifying, monstrous strength of termite show. Could this setup not be invincible? Just as I arrived at the farm gate, I bumped into Chloe, the daughter of the neighboring farmer. She had been sticking to me like a shadow since we were kids. When she saw my gaunt face and balding head, her eyes instantly welled up with tears, filled with shock and heartache. I couldn't be bothered to explain and hurried back to the orchard. In my makeshift lab, I grabbed a large batch of beetles and dripped the diluted gorilla blood into them. A brutal genetic rejection reaction began, and tens of thousands of bugs exploded and died on the spot. After millions of cruel eliminations, finally, a mutant designated number 2041 survived. It had black armor and was covered in thick hair, a perfect miniature ape. Thrilled, I leaned in for a closer look, only for the little bastard to cling to the glass test tube and scream at me at the top of its lungs. Bite. Baldy, I almost coughed up a mouthful of blood. The magnificent creator, gave you life, and the moment you're born, you mock me for being bald with an English accent. If it weren't for the fact that you're the only survivor, I'd crush you with one finger. Gritting my teeth, I named this species the Worm-Apes and threw them into the Grand Canyon in the southern part of the Sandbox. To give them time to think and develop a civilization, I adjusted the cell division rate in this area to 100 times acceleration, meaning 1 day equaled 100 years. After handling all of this, I collapsed exhausted onto my bed. When I woke up from my sleep, a miracle had happened. Because the Zerg were constantly dying, massive soul energy fed back into my body. My pale skin became healthy, my muscles gained a streamlined definition, and most importantly, my hair, which had fallen out entirely due to chemo, had grown back into a thick head of brown curls. Awesome, this felt better than winning the lottery. Chloe came over to bring me a freshly baked apple pie. Seeing my glowing face and thick curly hair, her jaw nearly dropped. She insisted I was experiencing terminal lucidity. I ignored her, held the fragrant pie, picked up my binoculars, and looked toward the sandbox. Upon seeing it, I gasped. The continent in the sandbox was evolving at 10,000 times speed. Behemoths ran rampant, the largest having already grown to the size of a cat. Meanwhile, my Worm-Apes had only been evolving for 150 years. In this Jurassic-like primeval forest, they were basically a walking buffet. Those velociraptor-like beasts could stomp a bunch of them to death with a single step. Watching the very Worm-Apes that had mocked me being brutally slaughtered and driven to the brink of extinction, I actually felt a pang of pity. After all, this was a race I had molded with my own hands. Since I'm a god, I might as well manifest myself. I slipped on blue medical shoe covers and stepped right into the sandbox. Boom! To those microscopic creatures, this step was an apocalyptic cataclysm. Mountains crumbled, trees fell, and countless giant beasts chasing the Worm-Apes were stomped into meat paste before they could even let out a scream. The Worm-Apes nearly pissed themselves in terror. Trembling, they looked up at me, a supergiant towering 10,000 feet high, radiating holy white light. With a head that pierced the cloud, sand collapsed to the ground. Only one young Worm-Ape stared at me intently, even daring to question me, asking why I didn't save them when I was so powerful. I chuckled. "You're the one." I extended a finger and gently placed him in my palm. He was so awestruck by my pupils, which to him were like the sun and moon, that he babbled incoherently. I looked down at him, my voice rolling like thunder. "Gilgamesh, do you wish to change your fate? I will not save you, but I can bestow upon you the spark of civilization, so that you may save yourselves." I brought him to the center of the canyon and took out a 2-foot miniature guest greeting pine bonsai from my backpack, planting it into the ground. To them, this was a towering world tree that reached the clouds. I placed 3 items at the top of the tree: an extremely sharp miniature alloy sword I custom ordered from Amazon, a match soaked in kerosene, and a transparent capsule filled with termite fluid. These are the 3 treasures of civilization. The sword of Damocles is the weapon to protect you. The torch is the origin of civilization, and that vial of the blood of power. As long as you can survive the fatal rejection, you will gain unparalleled might. Climb up and claim them. After setting him down, I turned and left the sandbox, casually dialing the time acceleration back to 100 times. In an instant, the entire world blurred into afterimages before my eyes. Little Gilgamesh, leading his people, spent generations and fell from the divine tree countless times before finally reaching the top. Holding the alloy sword high, he swore an oath atop the tree to lead his people to the pinnacle. In the epic genesis of later generations, this scene was recorded. A beast of wisdom, 10,000 feet high, shattered mountains and rivers as it came. It brought down a divine tree, set a trial of wisdom, and handed the 3 treasures of civilization to the hero King Gilgamesh. Over the next day, I spent my time weeding the yard, doing laundry, eating the lovely sandwiches Chloe brought me, and enjoying a relaxing pastoral life. Meanwhile, inside the sandbox, Gilgamesh lived out the glorious and brutal majority of his life. He used fire to drive away beasts, the alloy sword to slay mighty foes, ushered in the agrarian age, and even invented cuneiform writing. He took 131 wives and established a tyrannical, ruthless slave system. However, heroes age. Over 30 years later, equivalent to over 100 years in Worm-Ape terms, she had grown completely old. Sitting on a throne draped with behemoth pelts, looking at the trophies lining his walls, the decrepit Gilgamesh was unwilling to die just like this. From his robes, he pulled out the vial of the blood of power I had left behind all those years ago. The beast of wisdom said that only the bravest warrior could consume it. Am I not the bravest warrior in this world? world. Roaring wildly, he poured the termite genes into an open wound on his arm. The excruciating pain had him rolling on the floor. But in the end, he pulled through. The black fur on his body entirely shed into a sacred snow white. His muscles became as perfect as a marble sculpture. He actually regained his youth and acquired the terrifying strength of a termite, capable of lifting hundreds of times his own weight. With a crack, he crushed his bone armrest, his eyes exuding a cold cruelty. At this time, his wise and kind son, Aga of Kish, was preparing to inherit the throne. But the very first thing Gilgamesh did upon waking was to grab his sword, rush out, and personally slaughter his own son amidst cries of agony. "I have returned. Kingship shall forever be mine." Living out his second life, Gilgamesh was entirely unrivaled. He spent 3 days and nights dragging back, single-handedly, the corpse of the world-dominating behemoth Finba, a beast as large as a kitten. He sent the entire tribe into a frenzy and established the first city-state in history Uruk. He even dispatched explorers who traveled for over 20 years to the very edge of the sandbox, reaching a shocking conclusion. The world they lived in was flat and square, yet the more invincible he became, the more reverent he felt. Whenever he stroked that indestructible alloy longsword made of a material whose concept didn't even exist in their world, felt a deep sense of dread. This sword was like the sword of Damocles hanging over his head, constantly reminding him that high above the 9 heavens, there was a creator who could crush him with a flick of a finger. Time flew by and another 100 years passed. The city-state of Uruk reached the height of prosperity. But the 142-year-old Gilgamesh was struck by old age once again. Once a person is satisfied, they can never be satisfied again. Having tasted the sweetness of restored youth, he completely lost his mind this time. He didn't want to die. He mobilized the strength of his entire nation to search for traces of me. He captured countless dark warlocks and wildly slaughtered the behemoths in the sandbox to refine an elixir of immortality. The ecology of the entire sandbox was nearly eaten to extinction by these crazy worm-apes, but the power of time is irreversible. 30 years later, the white-haired Gilgamesh finally accepted his fate. He chose 2 new successors, bestowed upon them diluted termite blood, and allowed them to build cities, establishing a golden age where 3 kings coexisted. Yet, in the final moments of his life's countdown, he still couldn't swallow his last breath. He ordered craftsmen to carve an immensely grand divine statue, a 10-house sandfoot giant radiating white light, holding a young worm-ape in its palm. Taking his royal ministers and millions of his subjects, he knelt before the temple, weeping bitterly as he prayed to the heavens. "Great beast of wisdom, your devout subject Gilgamesh wishes to see you one last time before he dies." At that moment, in the real world, I was happily riding Chloe's ATV into town for a massive shopping spree at Walmart. I bought a bunch of washing machines, microwaves, electric drills, and even a high-pressure water gun, spending over $10,000, looking every bit like a redneck who had struck it rich. Returning home, I was leisurely peeling an orange when I received a notification through the brood nest that this guy was dying. Normally, birth, aging, sickness, and death are the laws of nature, and I wouldn't have interfered. But over the last few decades, in their quest to brew elixirs, these worm-apes had ravaged the ecology of my sandbox like a plague of locusts. If I didn't go in and teach them a lesson, my orchard would be left with nothing but these crazy monkeys. Adjust the time flow back to normal. I sighed, slipped on my blue shoe covers, and took a step into the sandbox. Thump, thump, thump. As my footsteps fell, the earth trembled and mountains shook. The massive city of Uruk, which in their eyes was impossibly grand and housed 10 million people, began to shudder violently. In the plaza, the hero King Gilgamesh, kneeling before the divine statue and so old he was about to gasp his last breath, instantly felt this world-destroying commotion. A childlike ecstasy erupted in his murky eyes. With tears streaming down his old face, he tilted his head back, staring intensely at the sacred face parting the clouds in the sky. After 200 years, the beast who bestowed the 3 treasures of civilization, you have finally returned. I looked down at the naive worm-ape I had once held in my palm. To his perception, it had been a long 200 years. But to me, the image of that hot-blooded youth raising his sword and roaring at the sky felt like yesterday. "Gilgamesh, have you been well all these years?" My voice pierced the vast sea of clouds, echoing like rolling thunder over the entire prosperous city-state. The tens of millions of people in the city, whether nobles or slaves, all dropped what they were doing and looked up in awe at Methi 10-house sandfoot giant piercing the clouds, radiating holy white light. Leaning heavily on the alloy sword, Gilgamesh trembled all over. He looked up, his eyes erupting with desperately greedy desire. "Beast of wisdom, I have fulfilled the legacy of civilization you commanded, but I do not want glory in the epics after death. I want eternal life just like you. Hand over the treasure of immortality." I fell silent. This emperor, who possessed all the power, wealth, and women in the world, was ultimately swallowed by the fear of death. To be honest, I wanted immortality too. As a stomach cancer patient constantly waiting for death, I wanted to live even more than he did. I sighed. "Gilgamesh, birth, aging, sickness, and death are natural laws. I have no treasure of immortality, nor can I tamper with life." "No, you lie," he roared in despair. Looking at my youthful body devoid of any traces of time, he went mad with jealousy. He suddenly took a step forward, his wild snow-white hair dancing in the gale. "If you won't give it, then I will take it myself. Today, I will personally slay you, you lofty beast, seize your power, and achieve eternal life." He turned his head and roared at the scribe behind him. Record this. In the 175th year of the Sumerian dynasty, the hero king Gilgamesh rallies the might of his nation to draw his sword against the beast of wisdom. Hearing this, my eyes turned cold. The last time he was near death, he murdered his own son. This time near death, he dared to point his sword at the creator who gave him civilization. Clang, clang, clang. Dull stone bells rang out, and the entire city of Uruk boiled over. Hundreds of thousands of elite troops surged out like a black tide. However, in my eyes, this was nothing but a dense swarm of ants. Countless arrows and spears rained down on me, and the result? They couldn't even pierce the fabric of my Levis jeans. Right then, Gilgamesh and the reinforcing king of the steppes, Ishtar, made their move. Utilizing the terrifying termite genes, they unleashed an astonishing jumping ability akin to fleas, leaping 20 to 30 feet into the air. Following the folds of my jeans, they climbed upward in a frantic zigzag pattern. In the blink of an eye, they had reached my knee. For ants, this speed is indeed impressive, but unfortunately, my size is greater. Without any mercy, I swung my massive palm, kicking up a gale, and slammed it down toward Ishtar like swatting a mosquito. With a bang, before she even had a chance to react, she spewed blood wildly and was sent flying backward. The next second, my palm swept toward Gilgamesh with crushing force. His face full of horror, he swung his alloy sword to block in front of him at the critical moment. With a clatter, he was swatted away like a cannonball, plummeting rapidly. Falling from a height of over 3 feet at my waist was equivalent to jumping from thousands of feet in the sky without a parachute for them. Ordinary worm-apes would have been smashed into meat paste, but with their bones shattered and vomiting blood, they actually still had a breath left in them. Meanwhile, my palm had sustained an extremely shallow scratch from Gilgamesh's sword. What did this mean? If you scaled their size up to human proportions, they were basically the Hulk and Spider-Man capable of scaling walls and surviving a direct helicopter crash. They had already initially acquired the power of transcendent species. I actually lost. I could only scratch a bit of his skin. Lying in a pool of blood, Gilgamesh let out a miserable, bitter laugh. I looked down at him from my lofty height. "You slaughtered species recklessly and destroyed the ecology of the entire sandbox. Since you won't heed advice, I have no choice but to destroy you." The fleeing army, hearing these words, instantly plunged into a frenzy of despair. Destruction, annihilation, extinction. Yet Gilgamesh still showed no fear. Coughing up blood, he looked at me with a tragic smile. "Before I die, can you answer my final 3 questions? First, by what means will you destroy us?" Looking at the scarred sandbox, I answered calmly, "Water. I shall bring down a massive, world-ending flood to wash away this sinful land." The earth fell instantly dead silent. Everyone was panting wildly. To unleash a great flood that drowns the whole world? This was not a power a beast could possess. The second question, Gilgamesh asked hoarsely, "This world is flat and square, and there are absolutely no footprints of yours. Who are you exactly? Why do you say all living things are equal?" "Because this land is the world I created." My voice remained completely devoid of emotion. "The savage beasts, the intelligent races, the plants, they are all my children that I propagated. I am the creator who made you." The air seemed to freeze. Then, Gilgamesh's eyes widened in bewilderment. Suddenly, he couldn't control himself and began to laugh maniacally, laughing until his heart tore. "Ha ha ha! So the legendary beast is the god who created all things, and we actually attempted to raise our swords against God." Tears streamed from his eyes from laughing. Using his last ounce of strength, he asked his final question. "How many days did it take you to create this world?" I thought about it. Driving the pickup to level the orchard, dig holes, and create the sea had indeed taken a week. So I answered truthfully, 7 days. 7 days. God created all things in just 7 days. This sentence seemed to shatter Gilgamesh's final shred of pride. His arrogance and haughtiness vanished into nothingness before absolute divine power. Amidst his mad laughter and delirium, his vision slowly blurred, as if he had returned to the moment in his youth when he stood in my palm. The epic hero king of a generation swallowed his last breath, turning into the dust of history. The king is dead. We are defeated. Countless armies broke down in wailing. On the city walls, the scribe Akkad was sweating profusely, his hands trembling as he wrote the chapter of the fall of the nation in the Genesis scrolls. God saw that the wickedness of man on earth was great, and he sent down a world-destroying flood. Just then, a young man holding a bloody bundle knelt at my feet. It was the head of the king of the forest, Enkidu. Weeping, the young man said his master would rather die resisting the decree than draw his sword against the benefactor who gave them civilization, begging the creator to leave a sliver of survival for the Sumerians. Looking at that peaceful severed head, I sighed. I didn't actually want to completely wipe them out. I issued my final divine oracle. Go build Noah's Ark, take a pair of seeds from every creature in the world, and escape the apocalyptic flood. With that, I turned and left the sandbox. A few minutes later, when I dragged the high-pressure water gun out from the warehouse, over 100 days had already passed inside the sandbox. The massive Noah's Ark had been completed. Standing expressionless 30 feet away, I flipped the switch on the high-pressure water gun. Boom! The stark white high-pressure water stream transformed into a monstrous waterfall, ruthlessly sweeping across the entire orchard sandbox. Giant cities instantly collapsed, trees were uprooted, and countless fleeing beasts were mercilessly swallowed by the deluge. The survivors on the Ark watched in shock as the sky split open, witnessing God unleash a great flood to cleanse the world. In a corner of the Ark, the scribe Akkad wept tears of age. Relying on my answers and his own wild imagination, He furiously wrote down the myth of God creating the world in 7 days. And this became the source of Western faith passed down forever in future generations. After washing everything and confirming the ecology was wiped clean, I turned off the water gun and went back inside to sleep. This was the fourth epic, the doomsday mass extinction of Genesis belonging to the Worm-Ape civilization. Early the next morning, as soon as I woke up, I felt a terrifying power boiling inside me. I rushed to the mirror and gasped. My height had shot up to 6 feet out of nowhere. My facial features had become warm and deep, like a classic Hollywood actor, and my physique was as perfect as a marble sculpture, absolutely looking slim in clothes but ripped underneath. The massive soul feedback from the third mass extinction had directly skyrocketed my physical attributes to the level of a professional NFL player. I couldn't wait any longer and immediately issued a command to the Zerg nest: integrate Zerg genes. Intense tearing pain hit me, and I passed out from the agony. 3 hours later, I washed off the black grime that my body had expelled and looked inward at my gene chain. Large sections of useless recessive genes had been removed. I had become a true Zerg capable of infinite genetic modification. However, when I tried to eliminate the stomach cancer genes inside me, a single sentence from the brood nest plunged me into a bottomless abyss. Cancer cells are the Botus rebel cells. The stronger you are, the stronger the cancer cells become. My face turned deadly pale. What did this mean? The better my current physical condition, the more crazily the stomach cancer cells inside me multiplied. I was originally in the midst of stomach cancer, but this feedback power had just catalyzed it straight into the terminal stage. I didn't have much time left. In the next epic, I had to deduce supernatural powers as quickly as possible to fight the cancer cells. But the sandbox was in ruins after the Great Flood. Relying on just me sitting around thinking of evolutionary paths was too slow. Since wisdom is random, he'll brainstorm. He'll drag a bunch of hardcore gamers into this mess. Gritting my teeth, I directly cleared a small 300-square-foot sandbox right in front of the yard gate. I similarly dug holes, made a C, and sterilized it with the flamethrower. Then, using the Zerg Secondary Brain's dark tech, I packaged this small sandbox into a holographic VR game called Spore Evolution and listed it on Steam. I wrote the game description to sound extremely arrogant: a sandbox building survival game. Start as a single spore, evolve your species, infinite possibilities. 1 day later, a veteran hardcore gamer named Max downloaded this unknown 73 gigabytes game in his college dorm room on his 3000 top-off-T-line Alienware rig. He put on his VR headset, clicked Start Evolution, and his vision instantly went pitch black. System prompt: player is currently in a single-celled spore state. Please evolve eyes and a visual system on your own. Max was utterly dumbfounded. This game didn't even have a beginner's tutorial and immediately asked him to evolve eyes by himself. He died countless times in the dark ocean and finally raged. Just to play a game, he actually ran to his Ivy League university library and started rigorously studying advanced English biology and genetics textbooks. Half a day later, he finally succeeded. For the ultimate field of vision, he insanely allocated all his nutrients into evolving eyes, creating a giant evil eye monster where 2/3 of its body was just an eyeball surrounded by disgusting, sticky tentacles. Ha ha ha, I finally did it. Look at these beautiful mountains and rivers. Controlling the evil eye monster, Max crawled onto the coast, looking at the hyper-realistic miniature sandbox world before him, shaking with excitement. The world belongs to me. Just as he was about to dominate the world, in the real world, the neighbor girl Chloe knocked on my yard gate carrying an insulated lunchbox. "Julian, open up. I brought you some barbecue." Coming. I got up from my rocking chair and walked straight toward the gate, accidentally stepping right on the evil eye monster that Max had just crawled ashore with. Splat. Turned into a pile of meat paste. Inside his headset, Max's screen instantly went gray, and bold words popped up: "You died. Please try again." In his dorm, Max smashed his Razer mouse to pieces, letting out an anguished wail of a broken man. I had just gotten on land. What kind of hardcore bullshit game is this? Devs, get your asses out here. Clueless to this, I opened the gate. The moment Chloe outside saw me, she completely froze. Although I had the brood nest mask my overly divine physical features, the transcendent, godlike aura from surviving 3 world-ending extinctions couldn't be hidden. Chloe stared at me blankly, gulped, and suddenly dropped a bombshell. "Julian, it's too pitiful for you to stay alone on the farm waiting to die. Why don't I be your fake girlfriend and accompany you through your final days?" I raised an eyebrow. "Fake girlfriend?" She casually patted my shoulder, finally showing her true colors. "There's a high school alumni party in town in a few days. You look so classy now. Come with me to keep up appearances. Anyway, since you're dying, those dollars are useless. Let's hurry to Macy's and buy you a nice suit to live it up." Good lord, so that's what this was about. She was treating me like a free party male model, plus an ATM. After accompanying this girl window shopping in the city for half a day and buying each of us expensive battle armor outfits worth a few $100, I drove the pickup back to the orchard in exhaustion. Sitting in front of the sandbox, I suddenly remembered the evil eye monster I had stepped on earlier in the day. Although it was incredibly ugly and had supplied all its nutrients to its eyeballs, making it a deformed piece of trash destined to be eliminated by nature. A brood nest informed me that because of its massive eyeball, this creature possessed terrifying mental power potential. Since it has supernatural potential, let's toss it into the large sandbox and give it a try. I took a glance at the monotonous terrain of the large sandbox and decided to custom build a swamp just for it. Since it was a swamp, it had to be muddy, sticky, and extremely fertile. So, I grabbed a large shovel, walked over to the backyard of Chloe's pasture, and shamelessly asked her dad for a large bucket of 100 natural cow and chicken manure. As I frantically stirred the cesspool in the sandbox, I revealed the benevolent smile of a creator. Future native inhabitants of the sandbox, when you step into this mysterious black swamp and feel the soul-piercingly fertile aura, please don't blame me. If you must blame someone, blame that idiotic gamer on Reddit named Speed Demon. After I threw that lump of evil eye into the newly built swamp, I didn't pay any more attention to it. After all, in cruel nature, a deformed species that used 2/3 of its nutrients to grow eyeballs was destined to be eliminated. But I still underestimated the resilience of life. In this predator-free cesspool swamp, the evil eye monsters bred madly. Eventually, due to a food shortage, they actually began a highly intense internal cannibalism. Through brutal slaughter, a supreme evil eye overlord was born, one that knew how to use mental charm to prey on its own kind. Without shedding a drop of blood, it slaughtered the other ordinary evil eye monsters and became the absolute ruler of the swamp. This also meant that after the Great Flood hit the reset button, the very first wild supernatural species was finally born in the sandbox. Meanwhile, in the real world, I was sitting with my legs crossed, munching on an apple, casually scrolling through Reddit on my phone. Good lord, that VR minigame Spore Evolution I casually threw together with only 100 slots had completely blown up on all the major gaming boards. That hardcore high-level player named Speed Demon had posted a several thousand-word review essay on the forum. Not only did he praise the 100 pain-simulated death convulsions to the heavens, but he also aggressively roasted the game's sadistic mechanics no saving allowed, relying purely on hardcore biological knowledge to evolve. What made me lose it was that these idiot players actually targeted me. In the thread, they confidently theorized that the giant sitting in the yard munching on an apple me was definitely the game's ultimate hidden BOSS. Since they couldn't beat me headin', they were actually conspiring in the comments, planning to collectively research neurotoxins to evolve a highly toxic species that looked like a piece of shit. Then, when I ate, they'd jump into my lunchbox one by one, aiming to put shit in my lunch, hiding poison in the shit so I'd have fatal diarrhea. Looking at the screen, I chuckled coldly. Alright, wanna play dirty with me, huh? I silently jotted down those IDs in my little notebook. Daring to mess with your creator, it'll make sure you get what's coming to you. Ignoring those keyboard warriors, I turned my attention back to the large sandbox. Over 200 years had passed since the Great Flood. The surviving Worm-Apes had established the Babylonian tribe. Having lost the holy alloy sword, they completely regressed to a cold weapon agrarian age, reduced to being food when facing prehistoric beasts. On this day, the tribe leader's daughter, Medea, led over 30 strong men out hunting and unluckily wandered into my cesspool swamp. As soon as they entered, the evil eye overlord activated its mental charm. A few burly men looked as if they had seen the most beautiful woman in the world. With bloodshot eyes and drool dripping from their mouths, they willingly walked into the mud pit and became the monster's snacks. Medea was an absolute badass. She led the charge. At the cost of nearly her entire squad being wiped out, she popped the evil eye overlord's eyeball with a single spear thrust and brought that foul-smelling, sticky mass of tentacles back to the tribe. To recreate the glory of the hero King Gilgamesh from the past, Medea convinced her father and lit the torches in the tribe. Over 400 women, for the continuation of their race, resolutely drank the blood of the evil eye. Screams of agony echoed throughout the entire night. The pain of genetic rejection left the camp littered with corpses. In the end, only 3 women survived: Medea, Circe, and Cassandra. Bathed in blood, they acquired the terrifying mental power of the evil eye, becoming known in history as the 3 Witches. The Babylonian tribe officially entered the era of wizards, ruled by witches. Seeing this scene, I was so excited I almost jumped up. The sparks of the supernatural had finally appeared, but I was already in the late stages of stomach cancer. If I let them figure things out on their own behind closed doors, God knows what year they'd finally invent a magic potion to cure me. I had to step in personally and pass down Earth's occult systems to them. But here came the problem. I was now a 10-house sandfoot giant beast. One stomp and the whole tribe would be gone. How was I supposed to get in there? Just as I was fretting, those players in the small sandbox who wanted to poison me were hiding under some leaves, whispering to each other while staring at me. A flash of inspiration hit me, and I directly issued a server-wide announcement in the backend. Emergency game maintenance. Forced log-off in 3 seconds. Amidst the impotent rage of players smashing their Razer keyboards, I grabbed a shovel, dug a trench underground connecting the large and small sandboxes, and buried a 30-foot-long white PVC pipe I bought from Home Depot. This was my exclusive VIP cross-world tunnel. Next, I put on my Oculus VR headset, created a player account, and logged into the game. After half a day of tinkering, I successfully evolved into a 3-eyed, black-feathered crow, so ugly not even its mother could love it. Even though this piece of junk struggled just to fly, as long as it could get around, it was fine. Controlling this 3-eyed raven, which had major Game of Thrones vibes, I squeezed into the PVC pipe, traversed the long dark tunnel, and finally stepped into the primeval dense forest of the large sandbox. Strutting arrogantly, I headed straight for the Babylonian tribe. By the time I arrived at the Emia pool outside the tribe, I coincidentally witnessed an extremely explosive scene. More than a decade had passed. The 3 witches were now in their 30s, 30s, but nourished by supernatural power. Their skin was still as flawless as young girls. At this moment, all three were soaking stark naked in the pool. But this was no erotic scene. It was a life and death standoff on the verge of breaking out. It turned out that the witch's mental power was far too violent. Once they became emotionally agitated, the powerful mental shockwave would directly shred an ordinary man's brain. To avoid the senseless killing of innocents, Medea laid down an ironclad law: witches must remain chaste. But the witch Circe had completely fallen into depravity. Addicted to her desires, she secretly drained the life out of countless strong men in the tribe. Due to her constant indulgence, her mental power had skyrocketed, and now she actually intended to use force to suppress Medea, aiming to establish a terrifying matriarchal tyranny in the tribe where men were treated as nothing more than breeding tools. Seeing that negotiations had broken down, four newly advanced witches wielding staffs instantly rushed out from the edge of the pool. Circe let out a cold sneer, and her terrifying mental power erupted with a boom, shaking the entire pool and whipping up monstrous waves. Right at this hair-raising, critical moment, the three-eyed raven I was controlling flapped its wings and landed steadily on a tree branch, letting out a gentle sigh. So this is the power of a witch? Who's there? The seven stark-naked witches instantly turned pale with fright. Without hesitation, they joined forces and viciously slammed an extremely violent mental shockwave right at me. However, their mental attack, which was enough to instantly kill a behemoth, hit me like a clay ox entering the sea, failing to stir up even the slightest ripple. Well duh, this crow body of mine was originally a brain-dead creature with no independent thought. What use is a mental attack against me? Seeing me completely unscathed, the witches were utterly shaken. They stared in horror at my bizarre creature, which clearly didn't belong to this world. Not even bothering to put on their clothes, they stood respectfully in the water and asked in a trembling voice, Are you a god? Forcing down the heat rising in me, I shook my black feathers and, using an extremely mystical, hoarse voice, activated my bluffing mode. I am Hermes, the god of wisdom and magic under the seat of the creator. I have come to ignite the spark of worldly truth for you. Then, without a hint of a blush, I packaged the Stoic meditation of ancient Greece, the chakra spiritual arts of the East, and the law of equivalent exchange from classical European alchemy all into unfathomable divine truths, dumping the whole lot onto them. Listening to these terrifying theories covering elemental conservation and equivalent exchange, the witches were absolutely mesmerized. They trembled with excitement, genuinely believing they had touched the threshold of godhood. After pulling off this perfect Tinutoften flex, I didn't give them a chance to ask any questions. I just yanked the power cord of the VR headset and forcefully logged off. Smack! The three-eyed raven on the branch died instantly, plummeting stiffly to the ground. This flawless death escape caused the witches to completely imagine a grand epic in their heads. After the great god finished his preaching, his divine soul detached from the physical body and returned to the divine kingdom above the 9 heavens. They knelt in devout worship, and then, treating my theories like ultimate treasures, brought them back to the tribe, madly kicking off the wizard civilization's race to climb the tech tree. Back in reality, I took off the VR headset, took a comfortable shower, and couldn't stop the corners of my mouth from turning up. The spark had been planted. As for whether they could research a magic potion to cure my cancer, that would depend on the comprehension skills of these otherworldly gig workers. Just then, there was a knock on the yard gate. My fake girlfriend Chloe shouted from outside, Julian, weren't you supposed to go to the high school reunion with me? It's time to head out. Coming. I changed into my newly bought suit and strode confidently out of the yard. At this moment, Chloe had no idea that the man standing before her had just saved and reshaped an entire civilization. I rode her ATV to town for the alumni party. At the party, I fully demonstrated the poise of a perfect terminally ill boyfriend. Just by casually sitting at the bar, that transcendent aura baptized by 3 mass extinctions completely mesmerized Chloe's former high school mean girls, helping her steal the spotlight in a major way. After the party ended, everyone relocated to a local sports bar for an after party. I sat alone in a corner holding a beer, only to unexpectedly notice a few college students in the adjacent booth spitting wildly as they stared at their phone screens. I leaned over to take a look and almost lost it. They were actually watching a Spore Evolution gameplay stream on Twitch. A guy wearing a hoodie with an Ivy League crest slapped his thigh in anguish. These closed beta players are so freaking noobs. Everything they evolve is deformed trash. This game should be left to STM majors like us. That one sentence snapped me wide awake. He was right. How could I possibly deduce the myriad worlds all by myself behind closed doors? Since you guys want to play so badly, then come work for me for free. As soon as the party ended, I drove my pickup back to the orchard and stayed up all night posting the update announcement for the Spore Evolution version 0.2 closed beta on Reddit and the Steam forums, adding 50 closed beta slots. However, to get a slot, you must submit a professional 10,000 word biology thesis. You have to explain the scientific rationality of the species you want to evolve. Moreover, the game will implement an elimination system if you suck. You'll be kicked offline directly. As soon as this incredibly hardcore, almost anti-human update announcement was posted, the entire internet completely exploded. Some big shots in Silicon Valley astutely calculated that, given the game's 100 realistic physics engine, supporting 100 players would require real-time computations from at least 3 million supercomputers. In other words, every single slot was taking up 100,000 worth of computing resources. This wasn't just playing a game. This was basically the devs paying out of pocket market to let you freeload on a supercomputer. In an instant, the closed beta slots on the dark web and black markets were hyped up by rich folks to 20,000 a pop, just to get the qualification to write a thesis. Internet-addicted teens, power-leveling studios, and even Ivy League slackers across America practically burst the doors of major university libraries. Everyone was frantically cramming The Origin of Species and the Cambrian Explosion. Early the next morning, my inbox was directly stuffed with over 1,000 god-tier theses. Titles like Evolutionary Hypothesis on Avian Skeletons Analogous to the F-22 Raptor fighter jet and Deduction of a Lightning Bird based on Electric Eel Structures. Each paper was fully illustrated, even detailing DNA double helix structural diagrams with absolute clarity. Looking at this mob of fiercely competitive gig workers, I flashed the benevolent smile of a Wall Street capitalist. Excellent. Your wild imaginations are all mine now. I tossed the job of screening new players to the Zerg secondary brain and turned my gaze back to the large sandbox. Over 100 years had passed in the large sandbox. The three witches had integrated the knowledge I bluffed them with, creating a complete system of meditation and witchcraft. Leading humanity to establish the Babylonian kingdom, they officially ushered in the golden age of witches. But where there is light, there is darkness. The witch Circe had completely fallen. Because a witch's mental power was so strong that getting overly emotional could blow a man's head up, they had to remain chaste. Yet, to satisfy her selfish desires, Circe had secretly kept a captive herd of those tentacled evil eye monsters and started playing extreme tentacle games. Relying on this twisted, lustful cultivation method, Circe's power skyrocketed, and she attempted to establish a matriarchal tyranny. Ultimately, she broke ties with the other two witches, defected, and founded the evil Thorns of the Rose cult. Although I was astounded by Circe's perverted antics, I also craved the convenience of this mental power. In reality, I decisively issued a command to myself: integrate evil eye genes. After a wave of agonizing pain, I successfully acquired mental power. Relying on the massive soul foundation fed back to me from the previous 3 mass extinctions, it took me only a few days to become a true wizard apprentice. Now, with just a random thought, I could carve letters into micro-engravings. Time flew by, and another 100 years passed in the large sandbox. In the year 198 of Babylon, the war which Medea and the spring which Cassandrahu had forged in Era reached the final moments of their lifespans. These two peerless figures, who had protected humanity for over 2 centuries, now had heads full of white hair. Supporting each other, they arrived at the plaza in front of the God of Wisdom statue carved for me. Kneeling on the ground, they sobbed uncontrollably. Great God of Wisdom, we are ultimately too foolish and failed to decipher the alchemy of life. If there is an afterlife, we only beg to see you one more time. Sitting in the rocking chair in my orchard, looking at the sandwich in my lunchbox, I suddenly found it hard to swallow. Whether it was Gilgamesh or the three witches, their struggle against nature with mortal bodies to forge civilization, this epic tragedy deeply touched me. An onlooker who was also terminally ill and could die at any moment. I couldn't change their fate of aging because I couldn't even save myself, but I decided to give them a final send-off. I stood up, found a watering can, poured in more than half a bottle of Red Rose aromatherapy essential oil I bought from Bath Body Works, and sprayed it over the sky of the large sandbox. Next, using my wizardly mental power, I carved their names onto a pink flower and hurled it forcefully toward the sandbox plaza. Finally, I pulled out my iPhone, turned the volume up to maximum, and played Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 Destiny on Spotify. The sandbox world instantly felt like the heavens were collapsing and the earth was tearing apart. I declare, at the passing of the three witches, a torrential rain of blood shall fall from the heavens, spreading fragrance for 10,000 miles. My vast divine voice pierced through the clouds. A sky full of blue dread rain exuding an exotic fragrance poured down in torrents, washing over the entire Babylonian kingdom. I declare, a monument of flowers shall fall from the sky, 100 meters tall. Let heaven and earth mourn. A colossal flower the size of a royal palace, like a sword of divine punishment, slammed into the center of the temple plaza, shattering the ground. I declare, play the music of the gods. Let the elegy ring for 10,000 miles. The passionate and tragic melody of the Destiny Symphony transformed into a celestial torrent, echoing through heaven and earth. Countless citizens of the Babylonian kingdom looked up at the sky, listening to the supreme divine melody of defiance against fate, and recalling humanity's blood and tears history from slash-and-burn farming to the present day. Millions upon millions knelt on the ground, weeping aloud. It's God, the God of wisdom, is sending our kings off. Bathed in the fragrant, blue-dread rain, Medea and Cassandra looked at their exclusive 300-foot-tall tombstone. Hearing that soul-stirring elegy of destiny, they looked at each other and smiled a smile of peerless beauty. This is enough. To receive such a send-off from a god before death, we leave this life with no regrets. The two breathtakingly beautiful figures, hand in hand, slowly collapsed before the temple. A generation of legends had reached its end. Far away in the deep mountains, the fallen witch Circe watched the three great divine miracles fall from the sky and was also moved to tears. She lay down in her blue-dread coffin and swore a vicious oath that, in a few hundred years, she would absolutely live a second life. I silently turned off the music on my phone and poured the rest of the essential oil down the drain. The era of the three witches was over, and the sandbox had entered a power vacuum. This was the perfect time for me to deploy the new species created by the second beta players and initiate the true hard mode. I turned my head to look at the small sandbox at my feet. The second beta had already been online for 10 hours. I originally thought these tryhard players would cook up some world-saving supernatural divine beasts for me, but when I opened the Reddit forums, I almost had a stroke from anger. That OG hardcore big shot, Speed Demon, had grown grinded for a full 10 hours. Combining neurotoxicology, he forcibly evolved a brightly colored, highly toxic rooster that looked like a fiery red phoenix. He named the damn thing the Grim Reaper Rooster. Even more outrageously, this guy actually started a Twitch livestream for the whole internet to see. The title read, Day 1 of Second Beta. Watch me live poison the apple-eating giant OSS. Hundreds of thousands of people in the chat were frantically spamming POG and 666. In the stream, this guy arrogantly yelled, "Brothers, the freedom in this game is insane. The giant is just an NPC too. Today, I'm gonna suicide dive into his lunchbox and let him taste the power of poison hidden in shit. I'm getting the server's first blood." Sitting in my chair, I was completely numb. I open a server for you, let you play the game, and you ungrateful peasants repay my kindness with malice, scheming day and night to commit patricide. I sneered and asked the brood nest's secondary brain, "How strong is the poison of this stupid chicken?" The secondary brain replied, "It contains a potent neurotoxin similar to a pufferfish. A tiny one can poison an adult human. But to a wizard like you, whose genes are near perfect, it has absolutely no effect. Fine, since you guys want to experience the harsh beatings of society, I'll happily oblige." Just as I was about to teach these idiots a lesson, the sound of Chloe knocking on the gate to deliver lunch came from outside the orchard. I stood up to open it. Seeing that I was leaving, the players hiding in the woods of the small sandbox instantly went crazy. The daily eating event has triggered. The giant has left the game trail. We only have a 4-minute window. Charge, brothers. Form a human ladder. Climb onto his chair. Free Frostmourne just for clicking. If you're a real bro, come raid this OSS with me. Over a dozen deformed players with 8 legs and 5 arms, acting like they were pumped full of adrenaline, formed a human pyramid and climbed onto my long wooden log bench. However, when they climbed onto the back of the chair, they didn't find my lunchbox. Looking up, they saw the massive black leather notebook I had casually left on the chair earlier. Look, the giant is always flipping through this book. It must be hidden lore. Cut the crap. Let's work together and flip it open. The dozen or so idiot players used every ounce of their strength to flip open the black cover, which to them was larger than a basketball court. When they saw the word Genesis stamped in gold foil in vintage English calligraphy on the first page, all the players collectively shivered. Holy shit, isn't this a sandbox building game? Why is there a main storyline? They frantically flipped to the next page. The Dark Cambrian Era. A 5,000-year endless night, the blue moon grass reigned supreme. The Light Cambrian Era. 5,000 years of scorching sun suspended in the sky. Genesis. The intelligent Worm-Ape race established a city-state. The hero King Gilgamesh vainly attempted to defy God. God brought down a world-destroying great flood, annihilating all living things. When they flipped to the last page and saw the still wet ink reading the golden age of witches, God sent down a rain of blood, a monument of flowers, and a heavenly elegy to send off the 3 witches. The hundreds of thousands of viewers in the Twitch stream, as well as all the players lying on the pages of the book, felt their scalps literally explode. Everyone gasped in disbelief. It turned out that the sandbox beneath their feet wasn't some ordinary farming simulator at all. Long before their arrival, this terrifyingly grandiose world had already experienced 5 vast, hyper-ancient epochs. Even the giant OSS they were trying to poison was actually the creator god who had unleashed the apocalyptic flood. An epic, terrifyingly hidden world-building lore enough to subvert everyone's understanding, had its tip of the iceberg forcefully unveiled under the live gaze of the entire player base. Just as hundreds of thousands of netizens were madly praising the game's lore, I happened to return carrying my lunchbox. Naturally, I had no idea these idiot players had peeked at my experiment journal, let alone that in their eyes, I had already become the creator god who unleashed the apocalyptic flood. I slowly returned to the log bench and opened my lunchbox, ready to eat. At that moment, I felt a slight sting on my arm, like a mosquito bite. I turned my head and saw a swarm of grotesque bugs biting me. I instantly sneered inwardly, a diversionary tactic. Huh? The tactics of these hardcore veteran players were obvious. Send bugs to their deaths to distract me, covering for Max, aka Speed Demon, to quietly slip his highly toxic Grim Reaper rooster into my lunchbox and poison me. It was a good strategy, but I was no ordinary NPC. Flashing a devilish smile, I directly called the system, forcefully increased the pain sensitivity of this swarm of bugs to 50. 100 perception would equal a real death experience in reality. Tuning it to 50, while not fatal, would absolutely be enough to make them convulse all over and leave a lifelong psychological shadow. Smack! I brought my palm down. Ah! The first bug was instantly smashed into meat paste. In reality, the moment that player took off his VR headset, he spasmed wildly on the floor like he was being electrocuted. His clothes were completely soaked in cold sweat as he let out a pig's laughtering scream. But the other players in the game had no idea about the truth. They were silently giving thumbs-ups in the Twitch chat. POG, this bro is going way too hard for the roleplay. That scream is literally Oscar-worthy. He poured his soul into it. Watch me, I'm gonna scream even worse and more realistically than him. Another player smugly rushed out, deliberately dragging his pain slider to 0. He climbed onto my arm, just about to bite. Smack! I brought my palm down again. Holy shit, it hurts so much. This guy let out a wail even more heart-wrenching than the last, giving listeners goosebumps. The surrounding players got super hyped, clapping and cheering. A veteran actor. This is absolutely a veteran actor. That death was so freaking realistic. Move over. This time I'm gonna play a tough guy. Even if I get beaten to death, I won't make a sound. A third player charged up. Smack! FK! It hurts to death. A scream tore through the sky, so miserable it sounded like his family jewels had been kicked hundreds of times and doused in Tabasco sauce. The players were utterly confused. What happened to the tough guy? Does this big shot have some misunderstanding of Schwarzenegger? But they still didn't suspect anything, thinking the pros were just playing up some comedic contrast. While these drama queens were lining up to die horrific deaths one after another, Max finally controlled his Grim Reaper rooster to silently crawl into my lunchbox. It rolled around madly in the piping hot mac and cheese, burying itself completely. The players in the corner wept tears of excitement. After countless sacrifices, we finally reached this point. Eat it. Poison this SSS quick. I picked up the lunchbox and started eating, spoonful by spoonful. Every player's heart was in their throat, waiting for me to take that fatal, highly toxic bite. But just as the spoon was about to touch the Grim Reaper rooster, I suddenly stopped. I rubbed my chin and muttered, "Swatting those bugs delayed me. The cheese has gotten a bit cold. It'll go heat it up in the oven." Every player instantly turned to stone, their faces twisting into an expression as stifled as if they had just eaten shit. Why was the BOSS being so fussy? An NPC with a microwave heating feature. I carried the lunchbox back into the house, chuckling inwardly. Eating you idiot players raw would be too disgusting. Since your poison couldn't kill me anyway, I might as well settle old scores and new ones together. I shoved the lunchbox into my high-power oven and cranked the temperature all the way to a maximum of 500 degrees Fahrenheit, about 260 degrees Celsius. The oven's red light instantly flicked on, resembling an apocalyptic furnace. Max, hiding in the macaroni, was still frantically reassuring himself. "It's fine. My pain is at zero. I'm not afraid of the heat." The next second, a non-human scream echoed from the oven, more blood-curdling than everyone else's combined. "Why, Jesus Christ, I'm burning alive." I stood to the side, thoroughly amused. I needed to teach you guys a lesson so you wouldn't spend all day plotting to murder your creator. Just as I thought the Grim Reaper rooster was dead and was about to dig in, a crisp, melodious, and resonant phoenix cry suddenly erupted from the scorching oven. I was stunned. It had been baking for almost 10 minutes. Not only was this idiot not dead, but it could still squawk. The voice of the system's secondary brain suddenly sounded. "The first Zerg hero has been born." Astonished, I opened the oven right away. There, sitting quietly in the center of the lunchbox, was a small bird entirely engulfed in vibrant flames. Its appearance was identical to the fire phoenixes from myths and legends. I quickly pulled up the status panel and saw that in the extreme 500-degree Fahrenheit heat, this guy had actually triggered a genetic mutation. He had become a transcendent species capable of surviving in fire, even acquiring the absurdly overpowered trait of rebirth from the ashes. Every time he neared death, he would turn into an egg and resurrect. Although he couldn't modify gene chains making him a pseudo-Zerg hero, this was still absolutely hitting the jackpot. Without hesitation, I kicked everyone offline for emergency system maintenance, naturally claiming this fire phoenix for myself. Grabbing the beetle's-eyed, exquisitely beautiful phoenix, I tossed it straight into the large sandbox world. As the phoenix descended, its terrifying heat instantly incinerated millions of giant trees, turning the area into a barren desert. The only massive tree that survived the intense heat became its perch. This was the sacred parasol tree of later legends. With the phoenix handled, I looked at the remaining ordinary, unmutated Grim Reaper roosters that had been roasted alive in my lunchbox. I picked one up with my chopsticks and took a bite. Instantly, my eyes widened, bursting with juices, incredibly tender. To make me take the bait, this idiot player had evolved this highly toxic thing to taste too good. It was as delicious as top-tier pufferfish sashimi. This is way too good. My snacks for future Super Bowls are sorted. I let out a satisfied burp. Meanwhile, Max, who had just been kicked offline, suddenly received a server-wide notification. "Congratulations to player Speed Demon for evolving the potential species Grim Reaper rooster. Achievement reward unlocked." Reddit instantly blew up, with the whole internet bowing down to the master. Max was thrilled beyond words. 3 reward options popped up in front of him. Without hesitation, he selected the first one: retain the Grim Reaper rooster as his initial spawn species. Ha ha ha, I finally don't have to start as a single-celled spore every time. I have my own exclusive species. Cackling wildly, Max customized his avatar and logged back into the game, leading his freshly hatched brood of highly toxic chicks. He strutted proudly across the sandbox landscape. Just then, the ground suddenly shook violently. I happened to be walking by. I glanced down, and my eyes lit up. Huh? Aren't these those delicious little chickens I ate last time? I'm feeling a bit hungry. They'll grab some to make chicken nuggets for a midnight snack. I reached out my massive, King Kong-like hand and snatched away more than half of his population in one swoop. Mux was instantly dumbfounded. The hundreds of thousands of viewers in the Twitch stream watched in sheer bewilderment. The chat was instantly flooded with LMAO and RIP. So tragic. Couldn't poison the BOSS and ended up becoming his mobile KFC. Congrats bro on class shanging into an American fried chicken. Tastes like chicken, crispy and crunchy. Whenever the BOSS gets hungry from now on, he'll just step outside to grab you for a snack. Max gnashed his teeth so hard they nearly shattered, his guts green with regret. The highly toxic assassin he had painstakingly evolved had actually become a main dish. I couldn't care less about the wailing on the forums and happily finished my midnight snack. To ensure the quality of my future meals, I even secretly used a burner Reddit account to stir the pot. Why do you guys only know how to evolve animals? Has no one thought about studying botany? Doesn't being a quiet tree doing photosynthesis sound nice? The moment I posted this, it instantly enlightened a bunch of tryhard players, and countless gamers stayed up all night studying botany. My orchard vegetable garden plan was perfectly on track. Among this group of idiot players, years, I noticed a true tech titan going by the ID Tech Baron. In reality, this guy was Lionel Sterling, a billionaire Silicon Valley tech CEO, but in this game, he was obsessed with farming and building machinery. To create tools, he forcefully evolved himself into an assembly line machine tool with 6 tentacles. He chopped down trees, mined ores, built houses, and even crafted a Flintstone-style wooden bicycle. Even more outrageously, feeling that the game was unplayable without ores to build an engine, he actually mobilized a group of top-tier engineers in Silicon Valley to help him design a biological engine. It was a round, green creature that looked like a slime, with no limbs, just a mouth and a single, muscular, thick tentacle. As long as you fed it, it would frantically pull a bellows, providing powerful kinetic energy. Lionel stuffed the slime into a wooden car. The moment the players floored the gas pedal, this eco-friendly biological car powered by eating cabbages started drifting wildly across the primeval sandbox. Gamers across the internet felt their scalps tingle. The freedom in this game is terrifying. They literally forced an industrial revolution out of the Stone Age. Just as the entire internet was marveling at the biological car, the wizard world inside the large sandbox was undergoing a suffocating, dramatic upheaval. Time flowed rapidly in the sandbox. The era of the 3 witches, whom I had personally supported, had come to an end. Meanwhile, the wicked witch's direct disciple, Medusa, rose to power with chilling aptitude. She laid low in the Babylonian kingdom to steal knowledge. Upon emerging, she directly declared the founding of a new nation, Rose. In less than 10 years, Medusa broke through to become an unprecedented level 5 wizard. Wearing a blue dread wizard robe and wielding her staff, she single-handedly massacred her way through the entire Babylonian royal palace. The once invincible Lilith, leading 131 Orthodox witches, instantly crumbled under her terrifying mental pressure, unable to even stand up. Submit or die. Medusa sat on the throne, her gaze ice-cold. Any old wizard who dared to resist was instantly blasted into a puddle of bloody mush with a simple tap of her staff. To preserve the last spark of the Orthodox witches, Lilith humiliatingly bowed her head. The Babylonian kingdom was completely reduced to a vassal state, ushering in the most desperate dark age. Medusa issued inhumane orders. The men of Babylon no longer needed to work. Their sole value was for breeding. Every month, they had to offer up 100 men to the Rose Kingdom for the evil witches to drain and enjoy. Even Lilith's childhood sweetheart, one of the 16 strongest male wizards in Babylon, was forcibly taken away by Medusa and added to her harem as a male concubine. Time flew by and another 50 years passed. By draining male wizards, Medusa's power surged wildly, breaking through to become a level 6 legendary wizard. The world called her the Monarch Emperor commanding death, and she was truly unrivaled. Meanwhile, Lilith, who had endured for 60 years, was still stuck at level 4. Her hopes for revenge were completely shattered. Watching all this unfold in the large sandbox, I stood in the orchard, rubbing my temples in a headache. While the evil witches' methods leveled them up quickly, it was all a twisted, unsustainable path of draining resources. They didn't conduct any research at all, completely severing the inheritance of orthodox alchemy. Without alchemy, who was going to research a potion to cure my cancer? I waited for 60 years, but the large sandbox utterly failed to produce a savior who could overthrow Medusa. The Fire Phoenix was strong, but it was currently an infant with undeveloped intelligence, so I couldn't count on it. Since the locals can't produce a savior, then I'll just have to parachute a peerless genius in myself. I narrowed my eyes and shifted my gaze to the small sandbox, to that tech mogul who just triggered a server-wide achievement reward by inventing the biological car Lionel. For orthodox wizards, knowledge is power. This billionaire CEO, who had maxed out his tech tree in reality, was absolutely the best candidate to go into the wizard world and research alchemy. At this time in the game, Lionel was looking at 3 reward options before him. He didn't choose to retain his species, nor did he choose a permanent qualification. Instead, he locked his eyes on the most mysterious third option: start your second life. My life in reality reached its peak a long time ago. Making more dollars is too boring. I hope this second life gives me some surprises. Lionel took a deep breath and decisively pressed the confirm button. Seeing him take the bait, the corner of my mouth curled into a satisfied smirk. Buddy, you asked for this. Go to the wizard world and bring down a dimension-crushing industrial revolution for me. After Lionel clicked the second life option, the system immediately prompted him to head to a designated location. I had kindly pre-buried a PVC pipe underground between the 2 sandboxes. The tech mogul excitedly led his painstakingly customized slime species and crawled into the sewer pipe. After a long journey through the darkness, these adorable slimes emerged from the water pipe. Seeing the towering giant trees reaching the clouds, the vibrant birds, and the complete magical ecology before them, Lionel was utterly blown away. This wasn't just a new map, it was a real, existing fantasy alternate world. He originally thought that with his cross-century scientific mind, he could absolutely be an overpowered protagonist in this alternate world. But less than half a day after landing, a group of evil witches in red robes happened to pass by. Seeing these round slimes with their strong, built-in tentacles, the witches' eyes lit up. You see, the evil witches' cultivation method involved draining men dry. Now that they had these highly reproductive magical creatures with powerful tentacles, it was the perfect substitute. Thrilled, they procured materials on the spot, dragging the slimes right there to begin their brutal, unspeakable cultivation of extracting mana. Hiding in the bushes, Lionel watched helplessly as his entire species was squeezed dry to death by these evil witches. The ground was littered with shriveled slime corpses. The psychological trauma for this high and mighty Silicon Valley CEO instantly expanded to infinity. To protect his purity, he could only play dead, burying himself desperately under the pile of corpses, narrowly escaping the fate of being violated by the witches. What kind of demonic world is this? Lionel's worldview shattered completely. After the evil witches left, a few impoverished, traditional witches passing by who were resisting the tyranny picked up the dead Lionel like a little pet and took him home. These 7 young girls, calling themselves the Elizabeth Coven, kept Lionel in a rundown shack. Living under their roof, Lionel discovered a truth that made his scalp tingle. He had lived here for almost 3 years, but in the real world, only a few minutes had passed. The time dilation of one day in reality equals 100 years here made him go completely crazy with excitement. He decided to bide his time and forge an invincible life in this world. To survive, he learned the local language and started bluffing the 7 little girls, claiming he was the great slime king who would absolutely overthrow the evil emperor in the future. These innocent young witches actually believed him. They scraped together every penny they had, buying the most expensive magic potions, and forcefully helped the slime integrate a wizard's bloodline. From then on, Lionel took living off women to the extreme. The 7 young witches risked their lives fighting monsters and earning money outside during the day, feeding all their resources to this slime at night. Lionel didn't hold back either. Relying on his era-transcending understanding of technology, he holed up in the shack and frantically climbed the tech tree. 20 years passed, and he had quietly broken through to become a level 4 wizard, boasting a combat power that could crush opponents above his level. But he found that these little witches could no longer afford the resources needed past level 4. To switch to a richer sugar mommy, this tech mogul demonstrated true skill. Using the bones and meridians of behemoths, he carved magical runes like circuit boards and forcefully handcrafted a tenfoodle, incredibly beautiful humanoid mecha resembling a Gundam, and he himself acted as the core engine, sitting inside the mecha's chest cavity as the pilot. He named himself Grantham, piloted the mecha, and infiltrated the Babylonian royal palace directly. Using his era-transcending alchemical tech, he instantly awed the former queen, Lilith. Believing she had seen the savior, Lilith didn't hesitate to throw the last resources of the entire nation onto the slime. This support lasted for decades. By this time, in the large sandbox, the evil witch Medusa had grown to a point of despairing power. Not only had she turned half-orcs into slaves, but she had also completely crushed Babylon's last line of defense. Just as Lilith sat despairingly on the throne, tearfully preparing to hand over the crown and announce the fall of her nation, boom! The sky over Babylon was suddenly torn apart. Lionel, who had laid low for nearly 100 years, finally emerged from his seclusion with Maxwell Gautier gear. He didn't fly over in person. Instead, he built a 300-foot-long F-35 Lightning II alchemical airship. In the power cabin of the airship were 10,000 slimes he had frantically reproduced. 10,000 slimes pulled the bellows simultaneously, converting physical kinetic energy into terrifying magical potential energy. Accompanied by a deafening mechanical roar, this heavy firepower fortress transcending the era charged straight into the skies above the Rose Kingdom. Emperor Medusa was furious. With a wave of her hand, she unleashed a sky-obscuring flower of death. The massive black blood rose seemed ready to swallow heaven and earth. Standing on the airship, Lionel sneered. 10,000 mechanical cannon barrels on the airship charged up simultaneously. A single blast of a tech-modified guard of spring transformed into a towering giant tree, forcefully blowing the flower of death to pieces. The entire mountain range trembled violently under this terrifying carpet bombing. Medusa became frantic and directly resorted to forbidden witchcraft. Cleaving open the gates to the underworld, she actually summoned the phantom of the strongest man from the Great Flood Irith hero King Gilgamesh. Facing this man who supposedly possessed level 7 epic combat power and had once drawn his sword against a god, every wizard in the world despaired. Yet Lionel calmly leaped from the airship. Piloting the beautiful mecha, he raised his shield with his left hand and drew his staff with his right, maximizing kinetic energy conversion. A move derived from precise mathematical calculations and tech modifications, the death curse of life transformed into a boiling sea of black blood. Like a scorched earth orbital weapon, it instantly blasted the phantom of the hero king into nothingness. The high and mighty Emperor Medusa experienced the fear of death for the first time in her life. Screaming in desperation, she unexpectedly broke through her limits in the heat of battle, stepping into the legendary level 7 realm. Her aura surging 17 times over, she laughed maniacally, declaring she would make Lionel her male concubine. Only increased by 17 times? This data model is too disappointing.
Lionel Sayede.
With the mecha at full firepower, a basic attack instantly blasted the newly ascended level 7 Medusa away, making her vomit blood, instantly one-shotting her. On this day, the tech-focused farming player perfectly demonstrated to these primitive locals what it meant to inflict a dimensional strike. Lionel ruled the world, establishing the Alchemy Empire, and eternally sealed the unyielding Emperor Medusa deep within the ocean. The entire wizard world completely entered a roaring era of industrial magic. Munching on an apple in the orchard, I watched this guy flex in the sandbox and couldn't help but roll my eyes. This shameless old fox leeched off women for 100 years, laying low until he was invincible before coming out to show off. He turned cowardly turtle startling into an art form. However, Lionel soon stopped laughing. Over 100 years had passed in the alternate world. The 7 little witches who had taken him in, as well as Lilith who had funded him, were all approaching the end of their lifespans. Even though he frantically researched life-extending potions, he couldn't stop them from aging. To save his wives' lives, Lionel could only build hibernation pods to freeze them all. Then, holding in his bladder, he hurriedly took off his VR headset and logged off. Back in reality, only a day had passed. This billionaire tech titan, who struck fear into Wall Street, rushed out of the bathroom with dark circles under his eyes. He even canceled a multi-billion-dollar cross-border merger meeting, threw himself in front of his computer, and posted a thread on Reddit's Rigaming and Twitter, grinded for over 100 years, finally became the alchemy emperor and rule the world. But my 7 witch wives are about to die of old age. How do I use modern medical biology to extend their lives? Waiting online, it's pretty urgent. Players on Reddit seeing this post thought this tech mogul was tripping balls and hallucinating. The comments section was entirely mocking him, asking if he had gone insane. Lionel didn't waste his breath. In response, he dumped dozens of high-definition 4K uncensored screenshots of the alternate world right into the thread. The bustling ancient wizard city, beautiful witches riding behemoths, sky-obscuring forbidden magic, and that breathtaking image of the world-destroying flower of death. The netizens who were initially laughing at him suddenly stopped. The entire internet instantly fell dead silent. Immediately after, Lionel dropped a bombshell that made everyone's scalp tingle. You thought I only played for a day? Wrong. 1 day in this game equals 100 years inside. I have genuinely lived through over 100 years of a second life in there. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The entire internet, like a detonated nuclear bomb, went completely crazy. Those who were previously mocking him for getting mental illness from gaming looked at those hyper-realistic alternate world screenshots and the detailed compendium of alternate herbal medicine he had compiled. The entire internet fell into a dead silence, followed by absolute madness, since real-world medical theories worked in the alternate world. To save the lives of those 7 cute little witch wives, medical students across America stood up like they were injected with adrenaline. The phrase "a healer's benevolent heart, we will never retreat" directly sparked a nationwide medical study craze on Twitter. From Johns Hopkins University to Harvard Medical School, the medical libraries of major universities were instantly packed. Even tech commentators on CNN and Fox News were stunned. Who could have imagined that a hardcore indie game about single-cell evolution could force these American college students to vigorously study modern genomic medicine? Sitting in the yard of my orchard, drinking a discounted Mountain Dew I bought for $5 a dozen at Walmart, I watched this internet-breaking spectacle, overjoyed. These Deegan hardcore degenerate players weren't just working for me for free, they now brought along the top medical schools in the world as backup. It looked like my terminal stomach cancer actually had a cure. Capitalizing on the hype, I simply posted a 3rd beta announcement on Steam, adding 30 new slots. Continuing the elimination system, I forced these players to sacrifice their hairlines writing biology theses for me. Conveniently, I could also legitimately pull Chloe, my fake girlfriend, into the game to play. While I was enjoying peace and quiet, Lionel in the game started stirring up trouble again. After posting his cry for help on Reddit, the old fox went back to sleep and logged back in. Returning to the wizard world as the ruling alchemy emperor, he actually felt that being invincible was too lonely. Mobilizing the power of his entire nation, he built a carrier-class F-35 version of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Carrying a group of beautiful witch ministers, he sailed majestically toward an altitude of 100,000 feet, insisting on finding the legendary Achilles' divine kingdom where the gods resided. Looking at the large sandbox, my blood pressure spiked immediately. You slick Silicon Valley geezer. Instead of properly researching potions to cure my disease, you fly up to the sky to look for gods. Aside from air and the ceiling of my farm's warehouse, where the hell was this land of the gods? The grand lie I spun to flex on them was about to be exposed. Left with no choice, I scrambled to the garage and hauled out the heavy-duty DeWalt industrial floor fan I bought for $300. Hooking it up to an extension cord, I aimed it at a small gap at the edge of the sandbox sky and hit the setting for level 1. I declared with a cold expression, "Above the 9 heavens, there shall be an apocalyptic astral wind. Those who vainly attempt to ascend to godhood shall be struck down to the mortal realm." On the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Lionel was in high spirits. Looking at the violently twisting transparent storm high in the sky, not only was he unafraid, but he laughed in wild ecstasy. I knew I was right. There's a gap in the sky. Beyond the eye of the storm lies the land of the gods. Bursting with confidence, wearing his mecha that output level 7 epic combat power and holding his staff, he looked like a Marvel superhero descending to Earth. He jumped right off the airship, braving the hurricane, stepping forward inch by inch. This was an industrial fan. The level 1 breeze was enough to blow away a thick Oxford English dictionary. Yet this old fox was actually tanking it, layering guard of spring, bulwark of death, and a bunch of other shields over himself. He gritted his teeth and inched forward. In this world, no one can stop me anymore, not even the gods.
Lionel Roired.
Oh, is that so? I sneered, grabbed the remote, and cranked the fan straight to its maximum level 5 setting. Boom! A terrifying airflow equivalent to a Category 4 hurricane exploded instantly, roaring like an invisible behemoth. The Alchemy Emperor, who a second ago was shouting my fate is my own, not heaven's, was smacked out of the sky the next second like a swatted fly, plummeting violently toward the mortal realm like a broken kite. The witches of Babylon turned pale with fright, risking their lives to catch the severely injured Lionel. This Alchemy Emperor, who had swept through the alternate world undefeated, covered in blood blood, looked at the eternal astral wind, his Deo heart completely shattered. I thought I was invincible. It turns out that, in the eyes of the gods, I am nothing but a laughable ant. Lionel's eyes were filled with despair. He gloomily took his fleet back and swore never to test the majesty of the heavens again until he reached the level 8 mythical realm. Seeing him submit, I breathed a long sigh of relief and quietly turned off the fan. That industrial fan used up a lot of electricity, and the power bill for this farm came out of my own pocket. However, I broke into a cold sweat. Now, a peak level 6 ant could barely be blown away by a category 12 hurricane. If they really broke through to the level 8 mythical realm in the future, a little ant waving its staff could slaughter a city on the streets of New York. Would I, the creator, still be able to suppress them? Seemed I needed to plan ahead. After dealing with this troublemaker, I rode my dirt bike into town to buy some groceries. Just as I pushed open the farm gate, I witnessed a truly outrageous scene. The botany players in the yard had actually pulled up their roots and were madly streaking down the game trail, dripping mud everywhere. Run, brothers. The giant BOSS is back. Stop pushing me. You stepped on my roots, bro. Holy shit, you dare steal my prime sunbathing spot? Watch me pluck all your leaves. Two trees were grappling with each other over territory, and one of them actually grew a fruit like a hand grenade and sprayed venom all over the other's face. As I walked by holding my plastic Walmart bags, these sentient plants instantly darted back into the dirt, rooted themselves, straightened their backs, and forcefully pretended to be quiet, green-potted plants, as if they were just a bunch of innocent Groots. I rolled my eyes speechlessly. These animals are getting more and more shameless. Back inside, I turned on my PC to see what these drama queens were up to on Reddit. But the moment I clicked in, the creator god, was completely baffled. The veteran hardcore player Max ID, Speed Demon, had posted a 10,000 word deep dive lore analysis thread on Rigaming, combining the historical documents Lionel found in the wizard world, the gravitational acceleration tested in reality, and that black leather diary reading Genesis. He performed a logically airtight, flawless ultimate speculation. Brothers, we thought the yard was the beginner village, but we were dead wrong. This yard is actually a multidimensional interstice, the cradle where the creator deduces the origin of all things. And that giant eating apples isn't an NPC at all. He is the supreme creator god who spans the multiverse and can bring down a world-destroying flood with a single thought. And we are the spores he personally deployed. As long as we evolve a potential species, we will be deployed to myriad worlds to push the history of civilization. The Evil Eye and Grim Reaper Rooster I evolved earlier have already become cornerstones of the supernatural system in the wizard world. As soon as this thread dropped, the entire player base reached climax. This lore was so epic it made their scalps tingle. I sat in front of the screen, utterly dumbfounded. What multiverse? What high-dimensional interstice? I'm literally just a terminally ill guy growing apples on a farm in upstate New York. These corporate slaves and college students, squeezed dry by me under the most brutal conditions, actually managed to imagine such an epic, godly setting. And the more they thought about it, the more accomplished they felt, wishing they could grind 20 hours a day to work for me for free. I almost snorted like a pig. Since you guys love self-torture so much, I'll gladly oblige. Even more outrageously, the sentiment on Reddit completely shifted. Players no longer thought about poisoning me. Instead, they all turned into fanatical cultists. Some wanted to offer me their loyalty, while others wanted to evolve into incredibly delicious fruits and deliver themselves to my mouth, just to trigger the so-called boss affinity. Seeing this setup, I decisively used a burner account to steer the narrative. Don't forget, everyone, the creator god's favorite food is actually the Grim Reaper Rooster. A single sentence jolted them awake. In the game, Max, who had just logged in to enjoy the worship of his fans, opened his eyes only to see a horde of bizarre plants and monsters charging at him with glowing green eyes. Quick, catch him, sacrifice him to the creator. Take off the head, tastes like chicken, crispy and crunchy. Poor Max, before he could even utter a word, was captured alive by a flock of hyperactive dryads. They violently plucked all his chicken feathers and tied him naked to the stone slab in my yard like a pure medieval sacrifice. I walked over with a smile and picked up the plucked Grim Reaper Rooster. Last time was microwave roasted. This time, let's go with KFC deep fried. Full and satisfied, I confidently began reviewing the tens of thousands of entrance theses for the third beta. I had originally intended to just go through the motions, but two god-tier papers filtered out by the smart brain made even me, the creator, gasp in awe. The first was a Rubik's Cube biological theory written by a 28-year-old genius female biology professor from MIT. She planned to evolve a species with no flesh or blood, only a mouth and extremely dense bones. As long as this thing was fed, its bones would grow wildly like steel ingots. Good lord, wasn't this living, self-growing metal? In the future wizard world, there'd be no need to mine ores. Just raising a nest of these monsters could bring about an industrial revolution. But the second paper directly upended my understanding. It was titled, Project Artificial God. Reading this Project Artificial God paper, I excitedly slapped my thigh. I was just stressing over how I couldn't build a land of the gods at 100,000 feet to cover my lie. If I could actually get these hundreds of players to fuse a wooden ship into a massive, living, thousands of feet long sky island, then wouldn't my city in the sky be sorted? These free laborers, who brought their own food and sacrificed their hairlines to boot, were simply too incredible. Without a second word, I immediately finalized these 53rd beta slots. I prepared to let these fresh grind gods enter the arena, ready to thoroughly squeeze out their surplus value. After setting up the third beta, I turned to the large sandbox. Since the time I blew Lionel down with the industrial fan for trying to ascend to heaven, over 100 years had passed. This Silicon Valley alchemy emperor, who ushered in the era of industrial magic, had lived to the age of 221 and was approaching the end of his life. Honestly, Lionel was a rare and benevolent ruler. He abolished slavery, advocated equality for all, and dedicated himself entirely to climbing the tech tree. Yet ironically, people often submit to the tyranny of despots but dare to raise their blades against a merciful, good king. The ambitious schemers below didn't appreciate his kindness at all. The remnants of the evil witches, the Rose Salvation Society, wanted to unseal Medusa from the deep sea. Meanwhile, the Half-Orc kingdoms, whom he had treated equally, felt that the only way they could truly rise up was to kill him. These two factions hit it off instantly. Taking advantage of his old age and failing strength, they launched a fatal betrayal. That night, flower petals danced within the Babylonian royal palace. Just as the witch Ermin approached the emperor for an audience, disaster struck. 7 level 6 wizards attacked simultaneously. 13 forbidden witchcraft spells bombarded the alchemy emperor's mecha like a violent storm. The mecha instantly melted and collapsed, turning into a pile of white bones. The entire Babylonian kingdom instantly plunged into chaos, with flames reaching the sky. In an unnoticed corner, a heavily injured, dying green slime used the chaos to escape the palace and passed out in a dark alley. In reality, Lionel abruptly yanked off his VR headset and, sporting dark circles under his eyes, rushed onto Reddit and X-Twitter to post an SOS that shook the internet. "Help, my alchemy emperor just got assassinated by a rebellion. Now my main slime body is severely injured and unconscious in an alley. I could be picked up by a passerby at any moment and roasted like escargot. What do I do? Waiting online. It's pretty urgent." The players across the internet died laughing. The grand emperor of a generation, a billionaire tech titan, was actually reduced to this state. Some joked that he should write his will quickly and leave his inheritance to the next player out of the beginner village. Others said he had already been cooked into American dark cuisine. But soon enough, various super heavyweights in reality surfaced, launching an unprecedented global cloud rescue. First up were the medical students from Harvard and Johns Hopkins. Based on the molecular diagrams of alternate world plants Lionel had sent over, they pulled all-nighters and actually ground out the theory for a third-gen genome expansion serum. Utilizing the phoenix blood he had extracted from the desert earlier, they magically modified a formula capable of washing away obsolete genes and restoring youth. The recipe was ready, but Lionel was still unconscious in the game. Just then, a renowned old professor of cognitive psychology from Stanford University stepped in. "You can try using extreme psychological suggestion in reality to forcefully awaken your cerebral cortex in the game." Treating a dead horse as a living one, Lionel put on his headset and frantically muttered, "Wake up," in the darkness. A few seconds later, he actually opened his eyes in the game. Upon waking, he found that he had been picked up by Ermin, the witch who happened to be passing by. Just as he was about to ask Ermin to take him back to the palace to seek help from the state mage, a Yale history professor and famous hardcore history podcaster quickly jumped onto Reddit yelling, "Whatever you do, don't go back to the city." Drawing from history, since they dared to assassinate you, there's absolutely a mole among the city's generals. Going back is walking right into a trap. Lionel broke into a cold sweat. Under the emergency rhetorical guidance of linguistics experts, he successfully fooled Ermin into believing he was the alchemy emperor's pet. Thus, the two embarked on a long journey of escape toward the emperor's secret vault. This escape journey practically became a Twitch text adventure livestream for the entire internet. Netizens, armed with maps of the alternate world, helped them plot the safest routes. When they encountered pursuers, retired military brass provided live online tutorials on how to use the terrain to counterkill. Along the way, Ermin's tough bravery and breathtaking beauty won over countless fans. Players even jokingly called this a Gandalf-style mentor ice sky rearing game. Fleeing for 6 years in the alternate world, which was only a short hour in reality, they finally broke through layers of obstacles and arrived at the secret vault hidden deep in the mountains. Following the medical student's recipe, Lionel boiled the phoenix blood and various herbs into the second-gen genome expansion serum and downed it in one gulp. A pain 100 times worse than death by 1,000 cuts instantly swept through his body. His slime form constantly shattered and reforged in blazing fire. When he woke up again, not only had his lifespan been reset and his youth restored, but because he had integrated the Grim Reaper rooster genes, he had grown a pair of wings radiating holy light on his back. He had become an inherently toxic, biblical, mythological angel slime. Players all over the internet looked at the screenshots he posted and spammed holy slime and POG. Fully resurrected, Lionel emptied all the materials in his little vault. Spending a month, he built 2 brand new, upgraded 10-foodle, Terminator-like perfect beautiful mechas for himself and Ermin. Year 539 of the Babylonian kingdom. A full 12 years had passed since the emperor's assassination. The rebels had fought tooth and nail for territory, and everyone thought the old alchemy emperor had long turned to ash. But on this day, 2 10-foodle mechas, looking like Marvel Celestials, crashed down before the gates of the Babylonian capital. The guards and commoners on both sides of the gate stared blankly at that young, handsome face filled with invincible dominance. Then, deafening cheers and emotional, tearful cries echoed throughout the entire capital. The emperor has returned. Our king is not dead. He has lived a second life and returns still a youth. Lionel wasn't in a hurry to attack. Piloting the mecha, he stood firmly before the gates of the Babylonian royal palace. His cold gaze swept over the entire capital as he dropped an incredibly badass line. I stand here and I will wait for 3 days. Within 3 days, all rebels in the world shall crawl to me and beg for forgiveness themselves. Seeing him post a screenshot of this quote on Reddit, the entire internet boiled over instantly. Badass. This is a true return of the king. Rebels, prepare to face the dimensional strike of the 4th Scourge. Lionel's return of the king move completely suppressed the entire wizard world. No matter how unwilling the rebellious wizard sects were, facing the youth-restored alchemy emperor, they could only obediently crawl to the gates of the Babylonian palace and kneel for mercy. Even Medusa, the level 7 epic emperor in the deep sea, despairingly announced, as long as the alchemy emperor lives, she will never emerge from the ocean. The world was at peace again, and Lionel ushered in his own era of comfort. Keeping his promise, he held a grand wedding of the century, marrying the 7 little witches who had accompanied him since his humble beginnings. Time flashed by, and hundreds of years passed in the wizard world. Relying on the 2nd-gen gene serum, Lionel lived to over 400 years old, becoming the longest living myth in wizard history. However, his 7 little witch wives, due to poor aptitude, only lived to their 200s before dying of old age, even with massive potion consumption. Disheartened, Lionel buried the F-35 hanging gardens of Babylon, which could fly to the 9 heavens, deep underground to serve as their tomb. He lost his grand ambitions. His only obsession left was to outlive Medusa in the deep sea, paving a smooth path to the throne for his apprentice, Ermin. Why isn't she dead yet? Lionel sat on his throne, looking at his gradually aging body, getting a bit anxious. Deep in the sea, Medusa was equally frustrated. Why isn't this Silicon Valley old thief dead yet? Is he, a level 6 wizard, really going to outlive me, a level 7 epic? Year 804 of the Babylonian kingdom. The 500-year-old Lionel finally couldn't hold on anymore. Knowing his end was near, he passed the throne to Ermin and went alone to the Temple of Wisdom. Standing quietly beneath the statue of the god, he recalled his magnificent life, from a slime playing dead to the alchemy emperor suppressing the world. His only regret was wanting to know if the gods in heaven acknowledged his achievements. I sighed in the orchard. Although this guy loved to show off, he was truly a great farming-style player. Utilizing my brood nest privileges, I made a divine bird bathed in white light descend before him. Grantham, the world will never erase the glory of your alchemy empire. Hearing these words, the old slime died with a smile. When the news of the alchemy emperor's passing spread, the entire wizard world wept in sorrow. Even his mortal enemy, Medusa, poured a glass of red wine in the deep sea. I toast your life of openness and honor. Within 100 days of your passing, I swear I will not break the seal. In reality, Lionel took off his VR headset in the bathroom of his Beverly Hills mansion. Looking at his face radiant from the alternate world's mental power feedback, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. But while he was reminiscing about his second life, I was in the orchard, cursing furiously. I had intercepted global network intelligence through the brood nest's secondary brain. Good lord, the major rogue states of the world had actually set their sights on my game. Based on the high-def screenshots and physical data Lionel had posted, they concluded that this was truly a hidden alien, high-dimensional world. The CIA, MI6, and Russia's FSB established national-level secret research institutes. They even planted their top-tier agents into my 3rd beta slots, preparing to climb the tech tree in the game, conduct space colonization, and incorporate the alternate world into their national territories. Get out of here. I slapped my thigh in anger. This is the apple farm I bought in upstate New York with most of my savings. You robbers actually want to annex my backyard as your territory and colonize the ants I'm raising. I originally wanted to just ban their accounts, but on second thought, rather than pulling the plug, why not let these self-righteous rogue superpowers work for free in my orchard? At this time, in the few hundred square foot 3rd beta small sandbox, 173 players in order to enter the alternate world as a group were undertaking an insane engineering project worthy of a creator project artificial evil god. These Deegan players divided the labor clearly. First, they built a wooden ship, then collectively committed suicide and reincarnated as marine parasites attached to the ship. As the wooden ship rotted away, the 173 players respectively transformed into bones, muscles, skin, and hair, forcibly assembling a terrifying Leviathan colossus that reached my chest and was 20,000 feet long. This thing was practically a taboo existence. It had no unified intelligence. It was a Cthulhu-esque amalgamation made up of 173 chaotic minds. The brood nest's secondary brain estimated that this conglomerate evil god possessed 4 overpowered traits comparable to a Zerg hero: unspeakable terror, form replacement, rebirth from a single drop of blood, and eternal existence. Even if smashed to pieces, these players could reassemble themselves like Lego bricks. Relying on the behemoth they had built, these players got cocky in the sandbox. Not only did they backstroke in the ocean, but they also talked trash on Reddit, saying they were going to step out of the sandbox, sit on the bench in my yard, and experience usurping the throne to be the creator god. Dare to sit on my chair? Haven't had a beating in 3 days and you want to tear the roof off? I sneered and decisively removed the permanent slot retention option from the system rewards, directly popping up the portal prompt for start your second life. Seeing no loophole to exploit, these players all howled in their voice channels. Whatever, brothers, let's go to the alternate world and meet Goddess Ermin. The 4th Scourge has arrived. Meanwhile, in reality, the undercurrents among those national-level spies and scientists hiding among the players had reached a fever pitch. They believed they were about to cross a space-time wormhole, and witness the great moment of human civilization stepping into cosmic colonization. Bring it on. Let the fourth Scourge turn up the heat on Emperor Medusa, who just broke her seal. With a cold laugh, I opened the PVC pipe connecting the two sandboxes. An alternate world sci-fi blockbuster, weaving together idiot gamers and rogue superpowers, was about to begin. As soon as the system prompt appeared, the players controlling the Colossus were instantly dumbfounded. A large line of text floated across the screen. This creature's energy is too powerful and cannot cross the world portal. Well duh. My 20-acre apple orchard only had a thin white PVC pipe underground connecting the two sandboxes. You guys built a 20,000-foot Colossus. How could you possibly fit it in there? But the thought process of these idiot players was terrifyingly unique. Since the whole thing couldn't fit, they'd break it down into parts. With a loud shout, they actually disbanded on the spot, forcibly dismantling the Colossus they had painstakingly built into countless pieces. They lined up and crawled into the water pipe, planning to reassemble once they reached the alternate world. While these players were making a racket, the undercurrents in reality were surging to their peak. In the secret institutes of the CIA, MI6, and FSB, countless top scientists stared intently at their screens. They had long discovered that the time dilation in the alternate world was 1 day to 100 years. Whoever could seize the initiative here could put their real-world motherland thousands of years ahead in tech. To seize control, the top agents sent by the major powers had already stealthily infiltrated the 13 Knights of the Round Table responsible for controlling the Colossus muscles. This was a high-stakes game of mafia betting on national destinies. They all wanted to kill off the others and become the sole brain of this Colossus. Not only them, but there was also one slip through the net. The MIT genius, reclusive girl Penny Parker, who invented the Rubik's Cube biology, had also secretly slipped into the portal with her horde of black Andrade iron blocks. This girl was a hardcore villain enthusiast. She had zero intention of helping the righteous Ermin. Her only goal in coming to the alternate world was a prison break, to rescue the imprisoned evil witch Charlotte, and then solo this righteous coalition formed by the 173 idiot players. You stand for justice, I stand for evil, and I'm going to solo all of you. Penny, using the alias Pandora, swore to open her Pandora's box in this world. Meanwhile, in the alternate world, a massive reshuffle was taking place. Death Emperor Medusa had just made her comeback. With a flurry of fierce operations, she completely crushed Ermin, reassumed rulership of the Babylonian kingdom, and plunged the world back into the shadow of the evil witches. But before this insufferably arrogant emperor even warmed her throne, she received a horrifying report. The witches sent to investigate the great western desert instantly bled from their 7 orifices and went mad. Even a level 6 legendary which suffered a mental breakdown and went crazy just from a single glance. Medusa refused to believe it and forcefully read the memories of the maddened witch. In the memories, there was only a mass of unspeakable, colossal flesh, accompanied by extremely evil, chaotic, otherworldly incantations attempting to brainwash them. Wow, a beauty. Nice. Hello, beauty. Huh. Why did she start vomiting blood and go crazy right away? Are we too ugly? It's all the fault of big shot speed demons' twisted aesthetics. Brothers, let's go. Let's go to the desert, beat up the phoenix, draw its blood, and give it to goddess Ermin as a welcoming gift. Just hearing these few lines of idiotic cross-server voice chat, Medusa spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, her eyes filled with despair and extreme terror. Unobservable, cannot be heard, incomprehensible. Is this the legendary god? This is a walking calamity. It wants to slaughter the phoenix, which has just broken through to demigod status. Terrified out of her wits, Medusa issued an immediate death order. All witches along the path must wear blindfolds and tightly plug their ears. They absolutely must not look directly at the evil god. Thus, as the players sprinted to reassemble in the alternate world, they encountered a horde of locals acting like they were blind and deaf. WTF? Are we so ugly that we don't even deserve a single glance? My self-esteem has taken a serious hit. Speed demon, get out here and take your beating online. Medusa was completely panicked. She ran to find her mortal enemy Ermin, and the two epic powerhouses banded together, rushing into the Temple of Wisdom to pray frantically to me, the creator, for help. Seeing that the lore imagination had gone far enough, I figured it was time to round out their worldview. I dug out a recently purchased 2000 DJI Mavic drone from the utility room, attached glowing special effects to it, and flew it over the alternate world. Conveniently, I used its attached mini speaker to turn on the Mystic Bluff mode again. Mortals, did you think this world was the only one? The gods in heaven have suffered heavy casualties. This otherworldly evil god has broken through dimensions to descend, intending to eradicate the infant god of phoenixes. Hearing my bluff, Medusa and Ermin trembled in fear. Meanwhile, the 20,000-foot Colossus had already trampled the mountain ranges and approached the Babylonian capital. These player SWO had just finished beating up the demigod phoenix and were chugging phoenix blood like Red Bull looked up and saw my glowing DJI drone in the sky. Wow, a floating continent. It must be the local gods coming to wipe us out. Who's afraid? We just rubbed the phoenix's face in the dirt. We're already gods. Don't be cowards. Get him. These brutes, who didn't even know how to cast a spell, actually bent down, picked up a mountain peak, and hurled it viciously right at my 2000 drone. Holy shit. Sitting in my yard, I broke into a cold sweat and quickly maneuvered the drone in an extreme drift to dodge. You little bastards, smashing my drone over nothing. I just bought it, since you guys are so arrogant. Don't blame me for dropping the hammer. Dealing with these players didn't require any apocalyptic magic at all. I sneered and directly pressed the enter key in the backend. Disconnect jutsu. The next second, holy light flashed, and the wind and clouds stilled. The 173 players, who were just getting ready to strike a pose for autographs, suddenly saw their vision go black. Connection lost. Rumble, the Colossus, having lost player control, was like a body stripped of its soul. Its bones, flesh, and skin instantly collapsed and disintegrated, crashing down onto the earth like a storm of blood and gore. The magnitude of the crash was like the end of the world. Medusa and Ermin, witnessing the whole thing, were shocked into silence. No casting delay, no fluctuation of mana. This terrifying evil god, which could not be looked at directly or comprehended, was instantly one-hot by the god of wisdom. Was this the mighty power of a god? I continued my bluff through the speaker. Don't just stand there. It has merely fallen into an ancient slumber. Before its flesh can reassemble, quickly use forbidden spells to blow its scattered flesh to all corners of the world. The two powerhouses snapped out of their daze. They immediately summoned the wizards of the nation and unleashed the strongest tornado forbidden spell, turning the writhing organs and minced meat covering the ground into a terrifying twister, forcibly blowing them to the ends of the earth. Thus, this shocking event was recorded in the history books of the Spear of the Golden Witch. A Cthulhu evil god descended, plunging the world into misery. The god of wisdom shattered it with a single strike, its remains scattered across the mortal realm, restlessly awaiting return. Meanwhile, in reality, the Reddit forums had completely exploded. WTF? Party wipe as soon as we leave the beginner village? What a garbage game. The god of wisdom's ultimate didn't even have a cast bar. Instant cast one-shot? Speed demon, you traitor, come out here and be sacrificed to the heavens. After a bout of furious cursing, they realized they weren't dead, but their situation was worse than death, because their organs had genuinely been scattered to all corners of the world. A massive who has it worse pity party kicked off on the subreddits. Brothers, I woke up and found that my skin was turned into a piece of parchment. Some blonde, blue-eyed native beauty is writing on me with a quill. You think that's bad? My tuft of hair fell into a bird's nest. Now I'm in a symbiotic relationship with that bird, acting as a bald spot of hog on top of its head. Move aside, my bone is being used as a chew toy by a behemoth. It's licking me like crazy. I'm covered in drool. I try to run away, and it just fetches me back and keeps licking. Someone save me. The most tragic of all was Tiger Cub, who had turned into a page in a book. He found himself bound inside a magic tome opened by a blonde native beauty named Linda. To show he was friendly, he tried to use the system translator to say, hello, I mean no harm, but what came out was, hey babe, wanna hook up? Linda screamed and backed away in terror, thinking it was a curse from the evil god. Tiger Cub panicked and quickly tried to change it to I am friendly, but the translation came out as, hey gorgeous, please stroke my body gently and write on me. It was completely over. Linda was so terrified she had a mental breakdown and fainted on the spot. A perverted magic book spitting American dirty jokes became the lingering childhood trauma of this native girl. Watching the players finding joy in their misery on the forums, I rubbed my chin. Impersonating a god wasn't a long-term plan. I needed to get something real to hold the fort. I pulled up Penny's Rubik's Cube biology genes and heavily modded them. I forced the smooth iron blocks to evolve Lego-like interlocking grooves. With this, I personally assembled a Redan block monstrous bird the size of a wash basin and tossed it into the sandbox. Built-in damage reflection, infinite growth, and rebirth from a single drop of Blood Me #1 bodyguard, the true floating island Achilles, was born. I originally wondered if I should mass-produce these demigod creatures, but the system prompted that manually cultivating over 17,000 cells into wizards one by one would shatter my liver from the grind. Looks like I'll just have to open a new wizard cultivation simulator sandbox later, trick these players into coming in as my cyber black market laborers, and make them grind it out themselves, I sneered. Meanwhile, in the sandbox world, a true bloodbath was just beginning. In the dense jungle, a few little witches had just killed a 20-foot-long miniature behemoth. After they left, cheering happily, skinless, blue dread muscle tentacles drilled out from a tree hollow and silently slipped into the corpse of the behemoth. The next second, the dead behemoth abruptly opened its blue dread eyes and actually stood up straight, striking a textbook Navy ALCQC close quarters combat lethal stance. Following that, the behemoth threw jabs and uppercuts in place, swinging with fierce momentum and surging wind. Muscle compatibility is not bad. In the alternate world, when a behemoth knows martial arts, no one can stop it. The possessor was none other than the infiltrated ex-Navy SL King of Soldiers Jack Ghost Richardson. He coldly watched the players' pity party on Reddit, a cruel smile curling at the corner of his mouth. He knew that the player who was stepped on and killed by a 100-foot behemoth was no accident at all. The top agents from other countries like MI6 and the FSB had also successfully possessed bodies. They were forging accidents to assassinate the ordinary organ players, to seize ultimate control over this colossus, and to win thousands of years of technological lead in the real world. The infiltrated agents of multiple nations had to engage in a frenzied battle royale on the continent of this alternate world. Got a later start than the Russians and the Brits, only managed to snag a 20-foot behemoth, but it's enough. I'll swap to bodies measuring dozens, hundreds of feet, slaughter my way into the wizard towns to snatch magic potions, survive the ritual, and become a wizard. Jack stomped his foot violently, and the behemoth shot into the jungle like a cannonball. Coming straight at him, a 40-foot berserk behemoth was staring him down. Jack showed no fear. Striking an MMA pose, his killing intent was fully exposed.